The point of discussion for this presentation is you have got a Singapore employment pass and you have a question whether you can bring your dependents into Singapore, how you can bring them, what visa is valid, and what they can or what they cannot do while in Singapore. So the agenda here is briefly these points: which passes are eligible to bring in their dependents, who are these dependents, what are the documents required, dependent pass issue process, can these dependents work or study in Singapore, LTVP options, long term visit pass option in certain cases, and some questions. So first of all, what is a dependent pass? Now if you are on employment pass in Singapore, then it is but logical that you will want your family members, maybe your spouse and your children, to stay with you. So the dependent pass is a visa to enter these dependents into Singapore and stay in Singapore along with main employment pass applicant. And who is qualified to bring in these dependents? Employment pass holders or S pass holders earning a fixed monthly salary of 6,000 Singapore dollars or more are allowed to apply for dependent pass. So few points to note here. The dependents of other pass holders like work permit holders are not allowed to come in Singapore on dependent pass. They are not qualified to apply for dependent pass. Similarly, the important point to note here is a fixed monthly salary of 6,000 Singapore dollars. Let's say your company has promised you 4,000 Singapore dollars as fixed monthly salary and another $4,000 in form of commission. Then in that case, even if your total income is 8,000 Singapore dollars, you don't really qualify. So it is important that you should check your salary structure and the details of fixed monthly salary with your company before you sign the offer or commit yourself to a specific company. Now moving on to next slide, who are these dependents? So there is a legal definition. And the family members, those who qualify as dependent, are legally married spouse and unmarried children under 21 years old, including legally adopted children. For some people, this can be a problem because they may be having a common law spouse arrangement or cohabiting arrangement where they are not legally married. Or they may have unmarried handicapped children above 21 years old. Or they may have unmarried stepchildren under 21 years old. In that case, these dependents will not qualify for dependent pass, but they can qualify for long-term visit pass. So technically they can come to Singapore but under a different pass and continue staying with the main applicant. What are the documents required for application of dependent pass? Now one thing you need to note is that dependent pass application is normally filed by your company which has offered you the employment. So once the employment contract is signed, the company or its employment agency will file for your employment pass as well as for dependent pass. So it is not something that you have to go and apply separately. So the documents required are completed dependent pass form. It is called as form number 12. Passport particulars page for each of the dependent, spouse as well as children. Copy of official marriage certificate in case of spouse and copy of birth certificate in case of children. Additionally, if educational qualification, work and salary details of the spouse are available, those also can be provided. So the emphasis here is on two documents, official marriage certificate and birth certificate. So both these documents must show the name of the person clearly. So in case of birth certificate, it should show the name of both the parents and the child clearly. It is also important to note all these documents must be in English, and if they are not in English, then they needs to be officially translated and translated copy needs to be attached. So what is the process once the dependent pass is approved? Actually, the process is quite similar to the employment pass approval and issuance. So once the dependent pass is issued, you can download the IPA, in principle approval letter. This IPA looks somewhat like this. So I have removed all the sensitive details, and as you can see, it says your application has been approved, and it also tells till what time it is valid and before which you must travel and get it issued. And this is only the first page, so subsequent pages will also mention if there are any conditions, medical tests, anything required. So if medical test if required, that will be mentioned in this letter, and you will be required to carry that out. So what is important is that you must read this letter carefully once issued. So then you need to plan your travel to Singapore for relocation along with a main employment pass holder. It can be done along with him, it can be done separately also. The in principle approval letter will contain one-way visa, one-time visa to Singapore. So you don't have to apply separate visa in your country of residence. And lastly, the letter will mention what are the original documents you need to carry with you. Once in Singapore, collecting the dependent pass process is quite straightforward. You will need to visit Employment Pass Processing Center. So generally the practice is the entire family will visit, where main employment pass applicant as well as dependent pass holders will go for the processing. Then at that center, officers will verify your passport and other documents. Thumbprint collection will be done. Thumbprint collection is not done for children below 15 years of age. Only members of your family above 15 will need to do the thumbprinting, and the DP card will be issued and will be sent either to your company or it will be sent to the agency which filed a dependent pass application. The next question is, can then these dependent pass holders either work or study while in Singapore? So dependent spouse can work in Singapore if the employing company obtains LOC, called as letter of consent. So letter of consent is a relatively straightforward and easy procedure, and if the company is ready to process, then you can obviously work in Singapore. We have another video explaining the LOC, so please watch that out. And when it comes to dependent children, they can study in Singapore in any local or foreign syllabus primary or secondary schools without any specific permission. However, they will need a student pass to study in post-secondary educational institutions. So if they are going for diploma or degree program, then the student pass will be required. Now I have briefly mentioned about the LTVP option, that in case you have common law spouse or unmarried handicapped children about 21 years old or unmarried stepchildren under 21 years old, then they can apply for LTVP, long-term visit pass. In addition to this, the LTVP option can also be exercised for parents of the main employment pass holder, provided that the employment pass holder is getting a monthly salary of more than 12,000 Singapore dollars. Please note, this option is available only for the parents of main employment pass holder, and it is not available for the parents of dependent pass holder. So in case you are thinking of applying it for parent-in-laws, then this option is not available. So here are a couple of questions that people often ask in this regard. So the first question is, when should I apply for dependent pass? Should it be applied with main employment pass application or after the approval of EP? So the answer to this question is, if your company is very new in Singapore, then we will recommend applying dependent pass after the main employment pass is approved. This is because if employment pass is rejected, then it may result into additional cost for you or your company. But if your company is established one and generally has been able to get employment passes previously, then it is better to apply both together, because then everything becomes easy in terms of travel arrangements and processing and issuance of visa. What is the validity of dependent pass? The dependent pass validity is tied to the main employment pass. So if main employment pass is valid for 2 years, then dependent pass also will be valid for 2 years. And there's one more question that came to my mind, sometimes people ask, and that is, are the dependent passes ever rejected? So generally I have not seen a case of dependent pass getting rejected. I can't recall any case. I don't see any reason why ministry will reject the dependent pass unless there is something wrong with the documents or with the person itself. So in summary, once the employment pass is approved, getting dependent pass is relatively easy and straightforward task.
Thank you for watching this video. This video was brought to you by Epica Consulting Singapore. Subscribe to our channel today to get notified when new videos are posted.